Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Ohio EPA's presentation on the opportunities and challenges of drinking water and wastewater regionalization. My name is Dan Sowery with the Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance here at Ohio EPA, and I'll be moderating this afternoon's presentation with Ohio EPA's Jerry Rao, John Bernstein, and Amy Cly. From the Ohio Water Development Authority, we have Ken Heigl, and we have Curtis Strickland from the Ohio Rural Community Action Program. I'm going to turn it over to Amy Cly.
Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to kind of kick us off here with a few opening comments, and then we will start working through the presentations. We have a great discussion lined up for you all today with lots of angles and ideas on the opportunities and challenges for regionalization with your water utilities. But before we go into the first live poll, I just want to make a few comments. And this issue is certainly of growing importance. And the bigger picture perspective on the needs and drivers for infrastructure improvements and investments is certainly something to consider. And it's no secret that our infrastructure across the country, and especially here in Ohio, is in dire need of attention. Some of the realities of today are aging hard infrastructure, the pipes and the plants. We have an aging workforce with our certified operators. We have increasing regulations. From my side of the house, I'm chief of the Division of Drinking and Groundwaters. Lead and copper is a big deal, along with our asset management requirements. We also have flat rates and deferred costs that many utilities have been operating under. Partly, in some areas, we've run utilities on the election cycle versus the infrastructure cycle. And then finally, the public expectations has certainly changed since Flint, Michigan, and other issues across the country, or the expectation of zero contaminants and cheaper free service. So just a quick word about Ohio's asset management program for the drinking water side. That was passed in 2017 and applies to all of our public water systems. And while it's not required for the wastewater side, we are encouraging implementation. And we're actually seeing many communities develop asset management programs for all their utilities because it makes sense and it's working. So it shouldn't be just a paperwork exercise, but really lead to that roadmap for a system to develop those local programs that ensure the long-term financial, managerial, and technical capacity. And one of the big steps is evaluation of the true current and future costs. And that type of information, those true costs, help support transparent and defensible capital improvement planning, which is certainly vital for communicating and gaining that critical customer support. It also leads to more productive conversations on sustainable decisions when you're considering options like regionalization or shared services. So with that big picture perspective, let's move on to the first live poll here. So first question, are you familiar with the concept of regionalization or shared services? A, yes, B, no, or C, maybe. It looks like the majority of folks on this call know what or have some concept of regionalization or shared services. For some of our listeners today, it's a new concept. And the maybe those are very fair answers, because I think the concept and what exactly regionalization looks like is evolving along with the concept of shared services. So thank you for your time on the poll. All right, let's go on to the next slide. So the funding challenge. So how do we pay for this rapidly growing cost of repairing and improving our infrastructure? These next few slides are going to illustrate the challenges, including that growing gap between the demand, the needs, versus grant funding. And one of the things is the 2021 Drinking Water National Needs Survey is underway, and in a year or so, we're going to have an even more accurate picture of what those needs are, including focus on lead and copper. But as you can see on this slide, we're looking at, on the wastewater side as well as the drinking water side, what those annual needs, reported needs are significant. 725 on the wastewater and 610 on the annual, and those numbers are only going to go up on both sides. So how do we talk about solving this problem? Next slide, please. This slide is not optimistic in terms of offering a solution to that question, but the grants versus loans and the proportion of total funding available that is available through grant funding is clearly not increasing to meet the growing demand. And although funding discussions at the federal level on infrastructure are currently positive, and if significant funding is passed, it could help us to close that gap. I think we have no expectation that it will fully address the needs. Next slide, please. And this graph provides a stark visualization of water and sewer rates as a growing proportional impact on consumer income, looking here at inflation rates versus annual average water and sewer rates. An increasing number of utilities are establishing local financial assistance programs for lower income customers, and recent federal recovery dollars are also being targeted toward utility bill assistance. And I can tell you at the state level here in Ohio, we are looking for ways to better support our water utilities in establishing those local assistance programs. So stay tuned for future training and presentations on the topic. And I also recommend that you reach out directly to communities in your region that have programs in place and learn firsthand about options and lessons that they've learned along the way. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, the challenges go beyond simply replacing that aging infrastructure. And with that, true current and future costs in hand, it's really time to reconsider or to take a first-time look at the opportunities that regionalization and shared services provide to meet that demand. Keeping all of these different pieces in mind, how do we look at the local traditional strategies for stretching dollars? How do we rethink some of our previous approaches? So I'm hoping, and I'm confident that the discussion through our next speakers will give you some ideas and potential solutions. So now we're going to do another poll, I believe, Dan. And I'm going to hand the mic over to Ken now.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for those opening remarks. And thank you for setting kind of the tone and the need for shared resources and regionalization. So let's do that poll question number 2. Have local budget issues caused your community to think of new and creative ways to address your sewer or water infrastructure needs? Thank you. Well, overwhelming, 74% are asking for creative ways to help address your needs. Amy shared prior that grant money is going down, loan money is available. So yes, the work is on you folks. The work is on your folks to constantly meet budget, meet those costs of your system, both the operation and maintenance and the debt requirements. And so hopefully today we'll kind of give you some ideas to start thinking about. So next slide. Yeah, thank you, John. First, in my section here, I'm just going to kind of define partnership and shared resources. Later on, you're going to hear examples of successful things, challenges, and resources available to you. But for the next few minutes, let's just kind of define what shared resources and partnerships is. You could all go out to Google. You could all search those words and get the Webster Dictionary definition. What I want you to think about right now is defining partnership and shared resources for your system. specifically for your system. And what do I mean by that? Take a good look at your system. Kind of, what are you good at? What are your strengths? What are you not so good at? What are your weaknesses? What assets are in abundant supply? Do you have treatment capacity? Do you have equipment that's used once a month? What assets are you missing? You don't have enough treatment capacity. You have an environmental issue. You need a piece of equipment that only is used once a month. I think this is so critical to take that step and really to do that self-evaluation, to kind of then say, hey, what can I offer to others because I have an abundance, or what do I need help with, instead of investing completely in it. So important step. Next slide, please. So why share this? Why share your resources? Why ask for help? Right? What are we trying to do? Well, we're really trying to have some cost savings, right? Cost savings is going to lead to that stable user rates. Maybe additional revenue by selling that capacity will help offset those fixed costs that you already have invested in. You may improve your service quality and also help you meet your regulatory compliance issues. Next slide, please. So options here for you, and some of you may know this already, and some of you may not. But municipalities, local governments have the ability to contract with other local governments. Municipalities can serve outside their boundaries, and if necessary, a regional water and sewer district can be formed. This is the long haul, though. With that one, 6119 is the long haul. But you do have the ability as a local government to work outside of your governmental boundaries. Next slide, please. Shared services can be both physical, and our next slide will be administrative things. But on the physical side, these are, interconnection between two systems. Again, that shared equipment, purchasing supplies. Can you get more buying power by buying chemicals, buying supplies with another system? And of course, maintenance. You can share maintenance. You can share equipment. There's valve actuators and such like that. On the administrative side, next slide. Billing systems. Does your existing community have time to add more administrative duties to the billing system, or pick up a smaller system next to you? Or maybe you're having a tough time with your billing, you're a small system. Maybe you can get an automated system from somebody else. So just don't think it's a physical connection. So a lot of times these administrative services are overlooked, but they can definitely provide some cost savings. Next slide. And what's important about this slide here, it really is showing the increased transfer of responsibility. The top of the chart here, this very informal cooperation. See what's going on next door to you guys, and see what you can share, all the way down to that complete ownership. So there's cost savings and ability to share all along this curve, this bar here, from informal to signing an MOU, signing a contract, to actually taking over another system or selling your system. So those are things to keep in mind as you define what shared resources and regionalization means to you specifically for your system, to help you get the conversation and the thoughts going. So that's it on my part. I'll now turn it over to Jerry Raup.
Thank you, Ken, and thank all of you in attendance. It's wonderful to see such a large attendance for a webinar on this topic. Over 300 people. It's fantastic, and it just goes to illustrate the level of interest that there is with this topic. So let's go ahead and start with poll question number 3. Poll question number 3, has your community engaged in any form of regionalization or shared services with a neighboring entity? A is yes, and B is no. Okay. We've got yes at 68% and no at 32%. So that's really a strong response. And I'm encouraged by those of you that have engaged in some form of regionalization or shared services. For those of you that answered no, we're glad that you're here with us today, because it's an indication that you're exploring the possibilities and there's some level of interest there. So fantastic. There's no wrong answer here. So thank you for the poll question. Let's move on to some of the challenges. I'm going to speak for just a few minutes on the challenges that communities and entities, utilities can face when they're considering regionalization and shared services. Amy and Ken did a great job, I think, of covering the topics of why you should consider regionalization and what regionalization and shared services mean. Clearly there's a lot of regulatory drivers and things are becoming increasingly complex for water and wastewater utilities and expensive. And so there can be some efficiencies that can be realized by exploring regionalization and shared services. But if it was always easy, we'd see more of it. So we definitely want to recognize that there are some challenges along the way. So we're going to cover some of those challenges here that communities have experienced. And some of them can be political. They can definitely be challenges with the community perception, as well as disparities among the parties. So we're also going to take a quick look at ways that you can overcome these challenges. So you see on the slide there, the political challenges. And here, I think we're looking at it from the standpoint of, in part, by the local elected officials. We're talking about mayors or village council, perhaps county officials, a utility board. And when they're looking at the prospect of a possible shared service or regionalization, it's not uncommon that there can be a feeling of a loss of control when they are entering into or considering about entering into a shared service or regionalization. Of course, it's very common. Those of us that have discussed this topic, we always talk about the grudges and the rivalries and the ever-present football, basketball, high school rivalries. And even though we joke about it, it's definitely, it can be a definite reality. So we need to kind of acknowledge those. And then I think one of the big challenges for on the political end is just a lack of understanding of the costs and some of the ramifications of exploring a shared services agreement or considering regionalizing with another entity. There are ways to overcome this, and you'll see this throughout the next couple of slides. In general, the ways to overcome is to educate yourselves, is to educate others, to kind of dive in and understand the details of exactly what is on the table. And so as it's kind of indicated here, you want to know what the objectives are. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And keep your eye on that, the positives that can come out of it. Obviously, when you're negotiating with another entity, it's always good to keep in mind what's in it for them as well as yourself. And you're going to want to know what the dollars and cents are. You're going to want to know what the numbers are and what your limitations are. There could be situations where you're considering a partnership, whether shared services or regionalization, and maybe the numbers don't add up. So you kind of need to know what those limitations are. Let's move on to the next slide. And there's some common themes here. These are challenges with community perception, and this can be a big one. it can definitely be a big one about the residents, the people who are paying the user charges within a particular area, a village or a service area. And of course, they may be worried about being taken advantage of. They're worried that either their rates are going to be going up, maybe to the benefit of the other entity, and they're just not going to get a fair deal. And that gets to the third bullet point of a lack of understanding of the cost of ramifications. Of course, we mentioned the grudges and the rivalries, and just while that can be a factor on the political end, it definitely can be a factor on the community perception end. The ways to overcome this, and I think these are really, really important, is to educate stakeholders. You really want to get out in front of these issues with folks before it can maybe get out of control with rumors and whatnot. You're going to want to, of course, learn the issues of both sides and understand that, and keep your eye on knowing what the mutual gains are. There's got to be some pluses on all sides of a partnership, of a shared services agreement. So let's move on to the next slide. More challenges can arise when there's disparity between the partners, and this could be the entities themselves or the people actually negotiating some of these arrangements, and the parties may feel like they're the other entities trying to take advantage of the situation, and nobody likes that feeling. We've all probably had it at one time or another where we've been involved in some business transaction and we just don't feel like we're getting a square deal, and we need to be cognizant of that between the parties. A big one can be the unknowns of the future. What are the future rates going to be, and the future fees that could creep into this. So ways to overcome this is to negotiate in good faith, meaning to be honest about it and to assume the best with the people that you're negotiating with. Get help when you need it. That could come from a number of different places. It can come from other people that have been through a similar circumstances. You may need to get some help or some advice, whether it's engineering or legal, or even from technical service providers. So get help when you need it. Reviewing the entire scope of the agreement. That's very, very important to understand the clauses, the outs, opportunities to modify, to amend any options that might be in a future agreement with another entity. And then developing possible strategies for resolving future problems. If it's possible, many agreement documents have dispute resolution language in it. In some cases, there may be a brand new board that is formed to kind of help govern things from the regionalization effort. And if that's the case, then that may be a venue to take things that need dispute resolution. And then lastly, you always want to walk away from the table with clarity of exactly what it is that you're agreeing to, and you might want to have legal counsel have that a review of that to make sure that you understand what you're entering into. So let's go to the next slide. And these are just some of the common challenges with partnering in general. And this is really like the fact that you have to understand that the future is always going to involve some forms of change. So, if you're thinking in terms of two entities that are negotiating today, their needs are going to change. The people that work within those utilities or the decision makers in the future are going to change. There will be some turnover. The regulatory rules will definitely change into the future. And there's a possibility that someone may deliberately not be following the agreement, which would definitely be a challenge with partnering. And then there's local politics. So there can be some struggles along the way. It can be difficult, but that shouldn't get in the way of pursuing some of these, because the benefits of sharing services or regionalization can really be tremendously worthwhile. So with that, I think we're going to go on to the next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to John Bernstein, who's going to talk about some successful examples.
Great, thank you, Jerry, and good afternoon, everybody. I don't think we'd all be here today talking to you about regionalization and the merits of this concept if we didn't have some good examples. This is an area the Ohio EPA has really been focusing on for probably the last 5 years. And if you remember the slide earlier that Amy showed, the grant funds are really diminishing. They're becoming a smaller and smaller fraction of the total funding universe. We've really worked to kind of have that regionalization be one of our focus areas to kind of commit some of our limited funds to this concept. So, these projects all share a lot in common. They take a lot of hard work, they take a lot of communication, and they take time. So we'll go through a couple of these. Okay, so the Village of West Union is a small community in southern Ohio in Adams County. The county is actually under what we call Director's Final Findings and Orders for unsanitary conditions in a number of subdivisions. And these are pretty small subdivisions, probably talking 20 or 30 homes, but they're spread out. They're not in town. They're outside of West Union. West Union, they looked at their system. They had a lot of work to do. They had a lot of aging infrastructure, a lot of needs at their lift stations. They needed a brand new wastewater treatment plant, and they needed new sewers. So the community really systematically worked to lay the groundwork and start working on their hard infrastructure. Pretty rare, but the community agreed to take over responsibility from the county to address the agency orders. So I think that's really rare that somebody agrees to take care of somebody else's problem when it comes to an expensive infrastructure endeavor. But what happened, and it's still an ongoing project. West Union agreed to take over these 7 subdivisions, in the outlying areas of the county. So if you look at this image, kind of the big orange blob in the center, that's really West Union. And these fingers, that's kind of comprising the subdivisions. It really does not make a whole lot of sense to install a tiny package plant, it's a small wastewater treatment plant in these outlying areas. That's a lot of maintenance. It's a lot of operation, and that's a big expense for the county to take on. So what does make sense is to extend sewers and send that flow to West Union. They have got ample capacity. They've already got an operator. It's just a lot less infrastructure to maintain. And we've resolved, unsanitary conditions in 7 areas. It's really a win-win for these residents and for the community as well. Village of Butler and Belleville, these are 2 communities in Richland County in northwestern Ohio. Again, with the orders, the Village of Butler was under orders because their plant was underperforming. It was not meeting its compliance obligations through its National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. Very old plant. Right next door was the Village of Belleville. They had terrible issues with complying with their permits as well as odors. And you had a number of outlying private operations. There was a school, a mobile home park, and a campground. All of them had small package plants that were just not meeting the needs of modern environmental regulations. This is on a very high quality receiving stream. It's a very nice area in Richland County. And kind of serendipitously, the Village of Butler had been working to go it alone, and they had got their permit. They were ready to build their own plant. They had an issue come up that slowed down their project. And at that time, the Village of Belleville had reached out to see if there was an opportunity to regionalize. And that was about the time that the agency was starting to look at this concept of regionalization and how to promote it with 0% interest loans as well as our grant-like funding. And we were able to connect the communities. They did have some of these kind of local squabbles. I think, in the past, it might have been their football teams just, were beating each other up. So they overcome these issues. They did their planning, and they were able to get a project underway. It's a pretty good distance between these two villages. I think we're looking at probably 6-7 miles between the two. A lot of times what you'll see with a new plant is the existing wastewater treatment plants are turned into pump stations, and you'll pump those flows to a regional location. So in this case, the plant was built, right between the two. It's a little unique. The village of Butler is actually smaller than Belleville. Oftentimes you'll see the bigger entity take over responsibility in a consolidation or regionalization. But in this case, Butler was a little better equipped, and they had a good location for the plant. I think the groundbreaking, has already occurred, and this is operational. So you've addressed, probably 5 different entities that were in non-compliance with their permits. You've addressed the aging infrastructure, and by taking advantage of some of that, limited grant funding, they're able to make this project feasible. Nelsonville, this is a pretty good project too. This is, I call it Nelsonville here, but it's really Nelsonville, Hocking County, Athens County, and these communities. This took a lot of intergovernmental cooperation to get this project off the ground. Really, the driver here was these 2 small communities of Murray City and Carbon Hill. Murray City is a village, but the Carbon Hill area is unincorporated. And these 2 areas have struggled for many, many years to try to get sewers to their residents, and they just could not get a funding package together. They really weren't equipped as these small communities to kind of run a plant once operational. Some of the local community members put their heads together, and Nelsonville had some capacity free up. They certainly needed some upgrades to their plant. I think they had a prison that was being served there that was closed down. So ample capacity in Nelsonville, and they agreed to be the regional provider. Due to some of the challenges with terrain, this is in southeastern Ohio. The best solution on the Murray City side was to go through a community of Buckdell. And, that actually allowed a third community to take advantage of this regional example. And, really popular, really good concept. And, we're online and really excited to see this one come to the finish line. Lastly, this is drinking water. So the previous 3 examples were all wastewater. We've seen it on both, and we do, promote and incentivize both drinking water and wastewater through our state revolving fund programs. Coshocton, it's a small community in Coshocton County, and the neighboring community of West Lafayette. Coshocton, they've been trying to be a regional provider for some time. They had a loss of some major industry in their community that freed up a lot of capacity. So plenty of drinking water capacity at their plant. The neighboring village of West Lafayette, they've actually got some, potential contamination of their drinking water source due to TCE plume. That's oftentimes from dry cleaning operations. So the communities put their heads together. They worked really hard, and with the help of some different grant funds from Ohio EPA and others, they were able to develop a regional water system. Coshocton is now the provider of West Lafayette, and we've eliminated that public health concern. And what you'll see sometimes with these communities, Coshocton might become the regional provider for West Lafayette. That doesn't necessarily mean that Coshocton is going to own and operate all of the drinking water lines in West Lafayette. There's many different flavors of regionalization, and that's really up to the communities to decide, where do you want to draw the line? I mean, what do you want to do? Certainly a small community might want to negotiate and have their entire infrastructure handed over, but there's many different flavors here. So who is the funding? Who's funding these different projects in Ohio? This is kind of a who's who of water and wastewater infrastructure funding sources in Ohio. At Ohio EPA, we operate the 2 state revolving fund programs. We've got one for wastewater, the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund, and one for drinking water, the Water Supply Revolving Loan Account. On the wastewater side, we make probably $500 million in loans available every year. And on the drinking water side, probably about $150 to $200 million, in projects. There's a lot of demand out there, not a whole lot of grant. On the wastewater side, we've got about $35 million. On the drinking water side, about 13. But on the wastewater side especially, we put a real premium on the regional projects, and we've made about $15 million a year committed to regional type projects for a limited grant-like funding, which is principal forgiveness. Our partners at the Ohio Water Development Authority, you heard Ken talk earlier, they do help us to administer these 2 state revolving fund programs. They've got their own market rate program as well, and they do offer some discounts for previous borrowers. They've also got a little bit of grant funding for unsewered areas or unsewered communities. Ohio Public Works Commission, they have some grant and loan funding. They fund all sorts of stuff, not just water and wastewater, but they do have a hand in kind of helping address some of these projects. Certainly, they've been involved in some of the regional projects that we've funded. USDA Rural Development, they tend to fund smaller communities under 10,000. We don't co-fund with them very often, but a lot of times they are able to offer substantial grant funding. So they're a good resource to look at if you're a small community. Certainly, they've been looking very hard at regional type projects the last couple of years. The Ohio Department of Development Services, they've actually rebranded. This is kind of an old slide now. They're now the Development Services Agency, but they help to administer the Community Development Block Program. And part of that is the Residential Public Infrastructure Grant Program. And that's targeted towards communities that serve, or for projects in communities that serve primarily residential customers for water and sewer projects. So typically their grants are about $500,000 or $750,000 a year. The Appalachian Regional Commission, serving communities in the Appalachian region of Ohio and southern and eastern and northeastern Ohio. They've got a little bit of grant funding, typically in the range of $250,000. Certainly at Ohio EPA, we work to co-fund with all these funders wherever possible. And lastly, kind of a newer kid on the block for water and wastewater in Ohio is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They administer what's called the 594 program, and that offers a limited amount of grant funding, pretty competitive. A lot of times it's Ohio Water Development Authority that's helping to administer that funding source. So, we all work together. We all talk together. I think Curtis Strickland will mention the forum that we administer with these funders to help explain our programs to the community members and citizens of Ohio. Okay. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Curtis, and we're going to take our final poll.
So our fourth poll question: were you aware of the different entities providing financial assistance for local water and wastewater infrastructure projects? Yes or no? Okay, so a little more than half of us on the training today were aware of the different entities who provide financial assistance for local water and wastewater infrastructure projects. So that's good. Hopefully that increases after the webinar today. Next slide. Okay, glad to be with you today. As I think Jerry said, I'm Curtis Strickland. I work for the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, probably more known as RCAP. We are administered by the Great Lakes Community Action Partnership in Fremont, Ohio. As you can see on your screen there, we have staff located all around Ohio who assist with water and sewer projects and other community and economic development projects as well. I've been with RCAP for 21 years. I'm located all the way down there towards the Ohio River in the Jackson County. My specialization is probably funding, project facilitation, project scheduling, and generally moving projects forward. So if you require any assistance, so you could contact me or Sherry Luce, who's the state director, and she can refer you to one of our staff members located around the state. We work very closely with OWDA and Ohio EPA. Next slide. So how can RCAP help when it comes to regionalization? We can assist communities with hiring consultants and following the law as far as the professional selection law. We can help coordinate or facilitate meetings between communities. That's what we do a lot of as sort of a third party. We can also coordinate or facilitate project development, help maintain project schedules, identify financing, develop financing plans, financing schedules, because as we all know, when it comes to financing, if you're using more than one financing source, all of those state and federal agencies operate on different schedules as far as when their funding is applied for, when their funding becomes available. So that can oftentimes get confusing. So that's a lot of what RCAP does, is we can help you know when to apply for different financing sources and how to pair those financing sources together to have a successful project. We also do a lot of working with you to complete community surveys and assisting you with tabulating income surveys if that's needed. We do a lot of financing applications to all the different funding sources, which Jonathan mentioned a little while ago. We help conduct public meetings, whether that's for CDBG funding or general public meetings for infrastructure projects. Next slide, please. We can help you maintain the project files as you go through the planning and design and construction of an infrastructure project. Grant loan administration, something we do a lot of. Completing asset management plans, which I think you heard both Amy and Jerry mention earlier. Contingency plans for your water systems. Utility rate studies. Help you develop and implement compliance action plans, which we get into a lot. Developing policies and procedures and agreements. We do a lot of training here in Ohio for both operators, water and sewer operators, as well as local officials. And we have a large GIS department located in Northeast Ohio who those staff members do a lot of GIS mapping. Next slide, please. So we wanted to just give some suggestions as far as making regionalization successful. So we put together a top 10 list of 10 suggestions for making regionalization successful. Go through each one of those now. Number one, it's important to use a facilitator, a third-party person or organization who can bring communities together to open up dialogue and start the discussion and communication. So that could be RCAP, that could be your local development district if you're located in Appalachia. That could be a local community economic development staff person for the county or for your area. That could be someone from the county administrator, someone like that. It could be somebody from a university, such as the Voinovich Center or Miami University. So anybody who could be a good third party who has experience in facilitation. Very important to have a good facilitator to keep the meetings on track and to make sure each party gets to provide feedback into the possible regionalization. Number two, organize a good negotiating team. So it's probably best for if two communities are coming together to discuss some sort of regionalization or shared services, it's probably best that full councils don't come together because those meetings get too large too quickly. It's better to organize maybe a smaller negotiating team at first, and then take back any decisions that need to be made to those councils or executive people after the initial meetings. So we're talking about CEOs such as mayors. Operators are very important because they often know more about the utilities and how things operate and where things are located. Utility managers are oftentimes very important. Public utility staff. city managers, village administrators, and then possibly even attorneys who can help with the legal items. Number 3, be open-minded. So don't start with the desired outcome when it comes to regionalization or shared services. Listen, learn, and determine what is best for your system over the long term. Also consider what you can do to help your neighbor, which might make not only your neighbor sustainable, but also your community sustainable in the future. Nearby communities benefit when they both are succeeding or thriving. So helping your neighbor and having a thriving community next door only benefits your community. 4, make a list of important points. So what's important to you going into the negotiations or the initial meetings? Go ahead and jot down those and take them with you or give them to the facilitator beforehand. So you have everything, you have your important points, your important questions that you want to make sure you get answered during the meetings. Because oftentimes I think you'll find that some of your questions, which you feel may be possible hurdles to regionalization or shared services, oftentimes the answers to those questions will surprise you. Number 5, put aside the past. As you heard other people say, the football games from the 60s, 70s, put those things aside, put aside the history, any history between former employees. This is probably new staff today, new mayors, new council people. So put aside the past, look towards the future. Number 6, discuss advantages and disadvantages openly. Oftentimes what you think might be a disadvantage might actually be an advantage when you figure out and you get your questions answered. I've saw that here even recently of, maybe one community who thought that something might be a real disadvantage to them sharing services or being part of a regionalization effort. Actually, it wasn't much of an issue at all. So discuss those openly so that you can really hear what the other community has to say. Share information. Any potential regionalization or shared services has to benefit both. So share all the information now so that there's no surprises towards the end. Number 8, organize all facts before making a decision. That's what you have your facilitator for, to obtain the information from both sides, organize that and disseminate it to both groups. Use spreadsheets or lists, any way to keep that information organized so that everybody sees the same thing. Number 9, think about the future. Look towards when we look towards increasing regulation, decreasing populations, increasing costs. What's going to be sustainable in the future? What are potential economic development considerations that you might take in as far as regionalization or shared services? So just think about the future and what might impact those decisions you're making now. And then number 10, think about the spin-off collaboration. So what else, outside of just the big regionalization effort that you might be trying to do or shared services, think about other things where you might be able to collaborate, possible collaboration on maintenance if the larger the two communities has equipment that they could share, such as valve exercisers or sewer cleaning or flushing or hydrant flushing, anything like that. Does the one community have GIS staff and maybe the other one doesn't? What economic development spin-off may happen, or what opportunities might there be? What opportunities to share costs or any other partnering. So, think about any of that spin-off collaboration. Next slide, please. So how to get started with shared resources regionalization. So obviously we need staff and officials of your own community. We need staff and officials of the neighboring community or the county. Think about where could services be improved or shared. Think about the strategies for opening the dialogue and the communicating benefits. What is the internal staff official opinion of sharing services? So you have to create buy-in from both communities. Utilize RCAP or other government resources and funding programs to make shared resources successful. And then obviously municipal solicitors and legal counsels of both communities is often very important. Next slide. So in closing, the objective is a relationship of mutual benefit between two utilities, not just an agreement. So mutual benefit between both utilities. Expect issues to occur from time to time. These things don't always go as planned. Things will come up, but work through those issues and deal with the issues and get independent help when you need it, whether that's from RCAP, EPA, OWDA, any of the other resources out there. Next slide. So here are the additional resources. You heard someone talk about the Small Community Environmental Infrastructure Group. So they meet every 2 months. I believe it's the second Friday of every even-numbered month. You can go on their website there, www.scig.org, to fill out a project profile and send in to OWDA to get put on their virtual meeting agenda. And then also we have the funding programs offered from Ohio EPA and OWDA through the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund for sewer projects, which has the 0% interest loans a lot of times, and the Drinking Water Assistance Fund as well, and then OWDA's Freshwater Fund, which does have a 0.5% discount when you're connecting with or purchasing another system. So those are very important resources. Next slide. And I'll turn it over to Dan for the questions and answers.
All right, thank you, Curtis. So we're now going to begin answering the questions submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit questions with Questions pane. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. And if we don't answer your question during the Q&A portion, we will reach out to you via email following today's webinar. So presenters, if you're ready, I'll now begin with the first question. We've only got a couple minutes here, but Jerry, I saw one of these questions I think really kind of drives home the point or one of the points regarding regionalization. So I wanted to, maybe this is a good one for you. The question is, if our community chooses not to regionalize, will that impact our ability to receive funding?
Yeah, that's a good question. Appreciate the question. So, Curtis's last slide, he showed that we have been offering 0% loan funds and principal forgiveness through both of our loan programs. We started that around 2015 and with initially and in 2016 or 17, we started to offer principal forgiveness. So, we were really trying to create an incentive for people to do this. Our funding programs require that the applicants conduct a cost-effective analysis. And, we're really beginning to look closely at these analyses now, especially if one of our applicants is, in close proximity to another water or sewer provider. So, I would say that if you're proposing a new or a significant upgrade project, we're going to be taking a really hard look at the analysis before we'll approve any funding for a project. So really, we're not trying to make this difficult, but we're going beyond just offering funding as an incentive, and we're moving a little bit, more into making good decisions with our funding and expecting a full and an honest evaluation in that cost effectiveness of that evaluation.
All right, thank you, Jerry. So with the limited amount of time, I think we need to wrap up for today. So thank you, Amy, Ken, Jerry, John, and Curtis for your excellent presentations, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Once you leave, you will receive the survey. We value your feedback. And we'd greatly appreciate it if you let us know how we're doing and let us know if there's anything that we can do to further assist you. Please check out our upcoming sessions. In May, we have a couple webinars. Join us on the 13th to get the scoop on what's new for the 2022 Water Resource Restoration Sponsor Program. And then on the 25th, we will provide an overview of the requirements associated with construction activities near bodies of water in Ohio. On the morning of June 10th, join us to learn about free money available to local health districts to assist low-income homeowners in repairing and replacing failing home septic systems and connecting failing septic systems to public sewers. Lastly, on the afternoon of July 20th, you'll learn about a variety of projects that can be funded through Ohio's Water Pollution Control Loan Fund. We'll also highlight special items of interest such as principal forgiveness and loans for stormwater projects. If you missed past webinars or you'd like to register for these or any other upcoming webinars, check out our training tab at epa.ohio.gov/DEFA. And with that, we will end today's webinar. Thank you again for joining us and have a great day.